Good evening, everybody. So, back again for we're actually going to do a part two of the letter D bands from our Rusted Metal book and a couple other associated ones that we've been doing. And E this time. There's not a whole lot of E bands, so we'll just have a few of those. So, but I forgot some I was going to mention for D, so didn't want to leave a couple cool ones out. So D part two, we'll start off with Portland guys that I saw a few times, oh, 3 times I think I saw them, 3 or 4 times back in the day. Dead Conspiracy, kind of an early death metal band, considered to be so now. Um, I interviewed Eric Dorset for the book, um, and this was a 2014. This came out, so they reformed with Eric and I think one of the other original members, maybe two, newer singer, um, and a couple new members in the band. And this is actually 4 new tracks with an '87 demo tape on there for the other side, which is kind of cool. So some old and new together, and they played shows and reissued a couple more demos and did some more new stuff. And um, yeah, they were kind of cool. Saw them with Savior and uh, Demise and a few other thrash metal bands that were kind of running around at the time. Um, and speaking of Demise, I have a cool reissue of a couple of their demos on vinyl that Floga Records, that also did Heir Apparent and a few other things, Greek label, I believe. So that's kind of cool. So Demise was another thrash metal band, kind of leaning towards the death metal sort of realm, and before that was really a thing. And then Deranged. These guys were a um, British Columbia band, Langford, looks like, and this was a 4-song demo they did. Fiasco Brothers Studio, which a lot of the metal guys recorded at up there in Canada. Um, Supreme Echo guy, Jason Flower, has a pretty cool label. He's done some pretty interesting punk and metal reissue stuff, um, and or putting things out that never came out before, kind of thing. Um, and we'll talk about a couple more of his releases soon. And then a couple non-metal mentions, although these guys are definitely still pretty heavy. Um, Fred Cole's Dead Moon, pretty popular Portland band. Got to see these guys a handful of times back in the day at Satyricon and um, Pine Street and so on. Um, Three-piece, Fred singer guitarist, his wife Tootie Cole on bass, and backing vocals, and Andrew Loomis on drums. Really, really cool garage punk band. Kind of harkens back to the '60s, which Fred actually started out in. Um, and So, yeah, pretty uniformly consistent. A lot of the Dead Moon stuff. There's Defiance, and, uh, Destination X, a little bit later album in the '90s, late '90s. But but yeah, they're always a cool band. Both Fred and Tootie, really nice people. It was sad when he passed away from cancer a short while back, a couple years back. Um, got to see them as Pierced Arrows the last time, with Kelly Halliburton on drums from Problems, and Jenny Dote and the Spurs, the opening for the Sonics, which is a really cool show down in Portland. And then the other band was Dharma Bums, which was Jeremy Wilson's kind of surf punk, surf rock band. They were pretty cool. I got to see them once at Satyricon, which incidentally, the opening band was Nirvana. The only time I ever saw them in early '89 for like $5 or so. Pretty cool show. So so that was the last of the D bands. For E, I got a few kind of interesting ones. So the first one is a '70s band that's pretty cool. They are Eclipse, and if you can see it here, um, these guys kind of were influenced by Kiss. They self-released a single, or it was on a real small label or something. Um, that was 2 tracks, uh, um, and it came out in '76. Backstreet Queen and Slave Driver, and then they went into a studio and re-recorded those tracks like a year later or something, with 2 other songs. And this pretty cool compilation, um, Pandora's Box. This also came on vinyl. I just grabbed the CD at Millennium. Uh, but there's those 4 tracks, and a bunch of other Northwest bands from the '70s. Um, their stuff's pretty heavy, definitely Eclipse. Um, Amusingly enough, there's a track from a High Voltage, which is not the Portland High Voltage band. Somebody made a mistake on this one. It's a completely different band, but um, so that's kind of a cool one. Let's see. This is cool. So these guys were pretty cool. So I got a couple little demo tapes first from Easy, which was the Friel brothers, Rick and Chris Friel, post Shadow after they came back from LA and split up. They formed this band, did a couple demo tapes. I think they had one more. And then they ended up finding out there was another band under that name, so they changed their name to Give, and they called their lone CD Easy. So they kind of flip flop it. So kind of interesting. But they're a pretty heavy grunge band. Kind of a heavier Pearl Jam, a little bit of Mother Love Bone and that sort of thing in there. Got to see them actually a few months back up in Seattle do a reunion show, which was pretty cool, over at the old theater up there. So let's see, what else do we got? So I don't have their cassette or CD, but pretty cool metal band, kind of a gothic metal band, sort of Aussie influence thing was Eisenblack. Played all around Oregon and Washington stuff. They were pretty cool. Never got to see them actually, unfortunately though. Let's see. So this was Matt McCourt put this out a little while back. Was the demos from Evil Genius, which was his band after he was ousted from Wild Dogs initially. They played some shows at Guerrilla Gardens and Starry Night and so forth. And some of the songs ended up evolving into tracks that were on the Dr. Mastermind record. And so these are the earlier versions of it with this lineup. So kind of a cool one. And then pretty much in the heavier Wild Dogs vein, Dr. Mastermind vein, kind of the same sort of. Then sort of friend Jim Harris, who fronted 3 or 4 of the Cruella reunion shows, including the when we put them on the bill in the 2018, our first Northwest Metal Fest when we brought that back in Seattle. This was his band from the early to mid 90s, Emissary, down in Southern Oregon. This has the 3 original demos they did late 94, early 95 range, and then they re-recorded them better in a better studio. Recently kind of did newer versions, so he did a fun little EP with a sticker and stuff. They've been going around playing a bunch of shows and stuff, and so they're definitely pretty cool. Couple other bands I don't have props for, but I did want to mention was Envy was a metal band in Seattle. It was pretty cool. They had a demo tape out, played a lot of shows at Riviera and a lot of those places. Equus, a little bit earlier in the 80s, did, played some shows at Lake Hills and other places. They were fronted by Bert Day. Vocals and guitar was a trio. We were in Battle of the Bands and different stuff like that. And Bert Day went on to form Hester Prynne a little while later on. At Erratic Pace, which is a thrash band playing a number of shows around. Extreme Hate was kind of a crossover band that had a little demo tape of a couple songs, and it had Loud Fart from the Farts. Lloyd Shattuck was his real name. So they were kind of, 3 years or something. They were around playing different shows with Accused and Silly Killers and a bunch of those bands, Malfunction and stuff. Ezra Pound was a pretty cool band that had a demo tape. Couple of the guys, Scott Pearson and Scott Bickham, went on to form Jesus Head Trip. Played around a lot, and as the '90s went on, so it's a few different bands. There's some more, of course, in Rusted Metal, and then one little honorable mention, Northwest Connection. I kind of always like this record, was Electric Love Hog. So of course these guys are a San Diego band, but they featured Kelly Lemieux on bass, who came from Harlot, which was Mike Potterboe of Glacier's band, both before and after his stint in Glacier. Kelly also has played in different bands. For a while now, he's been in Buckcherry and touring around and playing with those guys. It's also had Bobby Fernandez on drums, who was in the Post Lipstick band October, after those guys moved down there, and Paul and Brett and Bobby and another guy on guitar recorded some demos, had a tape and stuff, and were kind of evolved from the glam Motley Crue, Van Halen, Hanoi Rocks kind of influenced Lipstick to like a U2 meets Led Zeppelin, kind of more eclectic type of crossover thing. So yeah, so that's what we got for part 2 of D&E. Next week, of course, will be letter F. And then also we have a new compilation in production that I mentioned. I will be announcing that next week as well. I've got all the songs and everything now uploaded, and progress is moving along pretty well. So we should have a pre-order in April sometime. All right, thanks everybody. Talk to you soon.